Hey friends, welcome back to my channel. It's Tori. Today I decided to go through my shelves and look at some of the books and or series that have been TBR veterans for entirely too long. Now all of us have a TBR that is about the size of Mount Everest at this point, right? We're all on BookTube, we all see our friends reading books, we all see our favorite influencers reading books, we see books on the internet randomly, and we have a giant TBR. At least most of us do. If you don't, that's really impressive, I'm not gonna lie. If you're like me, you have a mountainous TBR, and sometimes the books that we were super excited to get to when we got them, we heard about them, we were all hyped up, and we put them on our shelves, oftentimes they kind of get left there for an indefinite period of time. So what I did is I went back to my earliest book hauls back on my channel. It was a time. But what I wanted to see is what are some of the series that have been on my shelves the longest, and even the ones that I had prior to BookTube that I have had sitting on my shelves before I even started making book hauls. So some of these books have literally been sitting on my shelves waiting for my time for 4+ years. Some of them haven't been that long, but some of them have. And what I wanted to do is share with you the kind of top 10 books that I feel like just kind of got put to the back burner and I feel really bad about it. And so I wanted to give them a little bit of love in the only way that I can until I read them, and that is bringing them up on my channel in a video about TBR veterans. So, Bloodsong by Anthony Ryan. Let's just start there. So this is a book that I picked up because it's a warrior school coming of age story with a kid with a chip on his shoulder and a rough past, which is always something I apparently go for. I have a type, okay? So I've been told that I'm going to absolutely love this book, and I don't doubt anyone who's told me that. I'm really excited to read this. This will also be my first time reading Anthony Ryan anything, and I feel like he's gonna be an author I really enjoy. I have literally 5 of his books sitting on my shelf right now, and I haven't read a single one of them. So I've already bought that many books of his, which hopefully is a good sign as to how confident I am that I'm going to enjoy reading his work. But eventually I need to actually get to Bloodsong and see what this is about. This is the first book in a series, and I've heard mixed things about the books after #1, but I think, correct me if I'm wrong for anybody that's read it, but I think that this can be read as its own kind of story, that it's not a big deal if you move on in the series. But either way, I need to read this book, you guys, because it has been sitting on my shelf staring at me for ages. The next one is the first book in a trilogy of chonkers, and I have definitely held up this book on my channel before, and I hope at some point soon that I can do that and say, guys, I'm finally reading it. That is The Forgetting Moon by Brian Lee Durfee, which is the 5 Warrior Angels trilogy. All 3 of these books, like, this is, I think, the smallest of the 3. So this is a chonky fantasy trilogy, and it is written by Brian Lee Durfee, which if you haven't seen his channel, he has some amazing content. He's a hilarious booktuber and really cool guy, so definitely check out his channel. And I've heard amazing things about this trilogy. I've heard so many people say that this is one of the most underrated epic fantasy series out there right now, and say no more. I mean, I'm definitely here for that. I did read the prologue of this book, I think about a year and a half ago, and loved it. So I'm still kind of baffled as to how I haven't gotten to this trilogy yet. I will admit that I have been struggling to find time for the chonkier series lately, and that is something that I'm hoping here in 2024 to remedy, because I miss reading chonky epic fantasy books, you guys. I love them, and I definitely think that when I get to a point where I'm ready for that again, I am going to pick this up, because I've also heard from a lot of people that this series, although it is a chonky book, reads very quickly, which I love. The next one is a book I literally picked up at an old hole-in-the-wall used bookstore years ago because I had heard that Guy Gavriel Kay was connected to Tolkien and that he like proofread or edited, and you'll have to correct me, I'm sure the Tolkienites in the comments will correct me if I'm wrong. But I've heard so many things about how incredible GGK's writing is. The book that always popped up when I heard him talked about was Tigana, which I have since learned from other people who have read a lot more GGK than I have, which doesn't take much because I haven't read any, is that Tigana really isn't a place that I'm recommended to start, actually. I think the ones that people have suggested I start with are The Lions of Al Rassan or A Song for Arbonne, I think is the other one, or The Sarantine Mosaic. I can't remember what, Sailing to Sarantium? I can't remember. But one of the other books that he's written is more highly recommended to me on a regular basis as a starting point because I don't know if Tigana is a rough point to start. I don't know. Those of you that have read it down in the comments, feel free to chime in. But I've had this book for ages, and it is so beat up, you guys. Look at this book. It is a thing of beauty. This book has been around. This book has been read and loved, and I love that about it. I'm excited to read this. I'm excited to have my first GGK experience. I just don't know that Tigana is going to be the first one, and that's okay. And I've heard from a lot of people, again, not to start here, which is probably why it's still sitting on the back of my TBR. Next up is a book that starts off the Raven's Mark trilogy by Ed McDonald. Now, my husband actually read this trilogy and really enjoyed it, and I heard him talking about it. I've had this on my shelves for ages. I don't know why I haven't gotten to it yet. They're not even that long, and he said that they read really quickly. I don't even really know much about what they're about. I was just intrigued by the cover when I bought it, and also, it seems like this is a bit of a kind of dystopian-esque fantasy or something that has a little bit of an apocalyptic feel. I don't know. I really don't know enough about this trilogy. I kind of wanted to go into it blind, but I'm really excited about it. And my husband said that he really liked a lot of the character development that happened in this trilogy, which I'm always here for. I have the entire trilogy and it's been sitting there for ages. And at some point when I need a super quick trilogy to just blaze through, I think I am definitely going to reach for this. It's giving me a little bit of grimdark vibes, which I'm also in a random headspace for sometimes. So I think that when I get to this trilogy, I am going to really enjoy it. I just got to get there. The next one is an author that I have read before, just not this particular series, and that is Wolf of the North by Duncan M. Hamilton. Now, you may recognize Duncan M. Hamilton's name from a series of his that I have read, and that is Dragon Slayer, which is a series I really enjoyed. I read it when I first kind of started on BookTube. I actually reached out to the author, or he reached out to me after I posted my review, and we chatted a little bit, and he is an author that went from self-published to traditionally published with his Dragon Slayer series, and this is one of his original self-published series. This is the Wolf of the North trilogy, and it starts with The Wolf of the North. And I have had it on my shelves since I read Dragon Slayer, excited to read something else by Duncan Hamilton, and I just haven't gotten to it yet. I have all 3 books. Again, it's there, it's on my shelves, but I just haven't gotten to that yet. And I think part of that might be because I haven't really been in a kind of Norse-inspired fantasy mood for a little while here, and that's fine. That's probably why I haven't gotten to this one and the other Nordic fantasy that I have on my shelves, because I've just gone through a period where I'm reading a lot of Asian-inspired fantasy and other things. So when I am ready to go back to the Northern Wastes with the folk of my heritage, I definitely am looking forward to picking this and some of my other Nordic fantasy series up, because I know that I'm going to get to a point where I'm definitely back in the mood for that. Next, we're going to go to a little bit of a YA swerve, and this was a book that I bought purely for the cover. I saw the cover, I was amazed by it, I read the synopsis, it sounded interesting enough, and so I bought the book, and that is The Beast Player by Nahoko Yuhashi. I don't know much about this other than it's a girl who has this special power to communicate with magical creatures. And if you look at this cover, this is still one of my favorite covers on my shelves. I absolutely love it. It is the first in a series, and I believe the second and third books are now out. And I just think it's really beautiful. I think, taste tested the first chapter or something like 2 years ago, but I never went on, and I don't really know why. It wasn't that it wasn't well written. I actually really enjoyed what I read, but I'm a, oh shiny syndrome person, so I just never finished it. And this is a book that I'd really like to read because I love this cover so much. I think it's really beautiful, and I would love to be able to see what the story inside is about. Next up is another author that I have read prior to this, and this is just the start of a series that I haven't read by him, And that is Michael J. Sullivan's Age of Myth, Book 1 of the Legends of the First Empire. There are a lot of books in this series, which is honestly part of the reason I haven't started it yet. But I think this one is kind of a Earth origin stories where we're going through the different ages of the world that Michael Sullivan created here, and he is obviously well known for his Ryuria Chronicles and Ryuria Revelations, which I've read. I just have never gotten to this. I bought this a long time ago and it's been sitting on my shelf, and I'm excited about it because I do love a really vast, epic style kind of world origin story, and I think that's what I'm going to get out of this, and I just haven't gotten to it yet. And I'm really excited to see how, I always like seeing how authors' work changes in different series, but also what through lines I can find that are similar, where you can go, oh, yep, that's a Michael J. Sullivan moment, or whatever. So yeah, I'm really looking forward to reading this series. It is fairly long, but again, they're not that long of books, so I am looking forward to getting to these soon. Next up is a book that I am intending to read this next year because I will be turning 33 in May of 2024, and what better time in life, honestly, if you haven't read it before, to read The Hobbit. I know I've talked about this on my channel before, so I'm not going to belabor it. The Hobbit and the Lord of the Rings trilogy are books that I still have not read. They've been on my TBR probably longer than any of the other books on this list because I've been wanting to read them since I was in high school and just never did. I never read The Hobbit growing up, I never read Lord of the Rings growing up, and I want to remedy that. And I thought about reading The Hobbit last year, but then I realized I'm turning 33 in 2024. Why on earth would I not read The Hobbit for my Hobbit birthday? That just makes a whole lot of sense. So that is my plan for May, is that The Hobbit will be the book that I read in my birthday month as a for sure TBR veteran. So this book will only be a TBR veteran for a few months more, but I wanted to bring it up here because I'm excited to read it, and it's kind of a horrible thing that I haven't already. All right, next up is, honestly, I think this book, if I remember correctly, I think this book was in my first book haul ever on BookTube. First or second for sure, and that was 4 years ago. And that is The Alchemy of Masks and Mirrors by Curtis Craddock. This is the first book in a trilogy that has a very, from what I've heard, kind of French Revolution, Three Musketeers vibe to it with the fantasy, really strong, excellent characters, male and female. I'm really excited to read this, you guys. I was excited to read it when I bought it. I don't know why I haven't read it yet. But now, all of a sudden, a bunch of people that I know have read this series last year. I think in 2023, there were a few people from some other channels that read this and really enjoyed it. So I really don't have an excuse anymore, and I do really love the idea of that kind of French Revolution vibe mixed with fantasy. I love when people take different eras of history and weave in some fantasy and see what happens. I love that so much. So I'm really excited to read this. I do have the first 2 out of the 3 books, and I'm really looking forward to it. And I'm hoping this year, one of the reasons I'm making this video is so that I can, when I'm setting up kind of sort of MBRs for each month, I can come back to this video and look at the stack of books and be like, you know what, I should probably pick one of those to read, because one of my goals this year is to read my shelves, and what better books to start with than the ones that have been sitting there the longest. The last one on this video is an author that I have read extensively. I have read him more than any other fantasy author on my shelves at this point. And that is Brandon Sanderson. And technically you might be able to say that this is kind of a cheat, but I don't think so, because I have read Era 1 of this series, but Era 2 is different enough that I feel like it counts, so just bear with me. That is Mistborn Era 2, starting with The Alloy of Law by Brandon Sanderson. Now, I have read a lot of Brandon Sanderson, and this series has been sitting on my shelves since I had my giant Brandon Sanderson kick back in the day when I was kind of in my early years of BookTube. I will read this. I'm nervous. I'm gonna be straight up with you guys. I am so nervous to read this because I think it's gonna be so different. And I loved Mistborn Era 1 so much. It was one of my gateway series, as it is for a lot of people, and I don't know how I'm gonna feel about it, because I know we're in a completely different, like, steampunk era for this series. We've got Wax and Wayne, very famously, the bromance of this series, I think. I don't know what I'm gonna get in this. It's kind of terrifying, and I don't know if I'm gonna like it. I've heard basically 50-50 from a lot of the people I've talked to that they really don't know how I'm going to feel about this series. So, not that that's going to stop me from trying it. I am going to try it, but I honestly needed to take a giant break from Brandon Sanderson works after I read, I think, like 12 or 13 of them in the span of a year and a half. I needed a break, and I really am getting to a point now where I'm ready to maybe kind of pick up another Brandon Sanderson at some point later this year. But it is going to be really interesting going back and reading his work again now that I've read so much more widely in the fantasy genre. I'm really curious. I don't know if this is going to be the best spot for me to like go back to and start with. We'll see. I'll keep you guys posted when I get that far, but it's been on my TBR for a while because I just wasn't sure that I was ready to read it. So that is my list of TBR veterans. There's obviously quite a few more on my bookshelves, but I would love to know down in the comments, what are the books that have been sitting on your TBR, whether physical or ebook copies, or even you haven't bought the book yet, it's just been in the back of your mind for a long time. What are the TBR veterans for you? Let me know. And if you've read any of these books that I mentioned in this video, please let me know what you thought of them and if you think I'm going to enjoy the read. I hope you guys are having a fantastic week. I hope you're reading 5-star reads, and I'll see you in the next video.